Welcome to Live Vita, the show for women who are ready to break free from diet culture, nourish their bodies intuitively, and reconnect with their natural rhythms. I'm Shay, a registered holistic nutritionist and founder of the Vita Method, where I help women support their gut, hormones, and metabolism through practical, evidence-informed nutrition and lifestyle changes, all without the overwhelm. So whether you're struggling with bloating, energy crashes, metabolic imbalances, or just feeling confused and out of sync with your body, you're in the right place. Here we'll talk about real nourishment, metabolism, slow living, and everything in between. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the Live Vita podcast. Today we are talking all about intuitive eating. And this is something that I feel very strongly about. It basically is the backbone of my coaching. So when you come to me with gut health problems, metabolism issues, you want more energy, you want to stop bloating, the root of the work is actually learning how to eat intuitively. However, there are a lot of pitfalls with intuitive eating. One of the things I see most commented in different forums and different spaces is that people tried intuitive eating and they say it didn't work for them. So we're going to talk a lot about this today. We're going to talk about what is intuitive eating, why do you ultimately want to be able to eat intuitively, why is this good for your body, etc., etc. So first of all, we want to understand that intuitive eating is making food choices that honor your health and your body functioning. It is not just throwing in the towel and eating whatever you want. It's not disregarding your health. It's not, I'm just going to eat bags of chips all the time because that's what my intuition is telling me. I almost guarantee that your intuition is not telling you to eat multiple bags of chips or multiple pints of ice cream or whatever that trigger food is. That's not your intuition. Your intuition is actually the voice that is saying afterwards or partway through, we shouldn't do this. Maybe we should stop. I don't actually want this. This feels gross. This isn't making me feel good. I don't feel well. That is your intuition, but we're very conditioned to not listen to that voice. We're very conditioned to put our authority or our self understanding into the hands of somebody else or something else. So maybe you've tried intuitive eating, you wanted some freedom from diet rules, but you ended up being more confused or overeating or gaining weight, feeling like it doesn't work for you, and you're like, I'm just gonna have to count my calories for life. Like that is what I need to do because I can't trust my body. But here's the thing. If you have to spend the rest of your life tracking your calories because you don't trust your body, you're never going to reach a place of somatic safety. You're basically outsourcing your own authority to a calorie tracker to make sure that you're quote unquote doing the right thing. But if your body stops living in a stress response state and learns how to self-regulate because you have organs, hormones, different systems in the body that are intended and designed to regulate these things, you don't need a calorie tracking app. You need to get to a place where your body is regulated, your nervous system is regulated. You have systems in place to manage your health. They just need to come back online. And intuitive eating actually will teach you how to do this if you move through the process. But the thing about intuitive eating is it's not really a process that you should undertake on your own without guidance because, like I said, there's so many pitfalls, people get confused, and then they feel like it didn't work for them. But the thing is, they didn't actually get to the intuitive part. So, for example, in my own story, I very unintentionally came into the intuitive eating space. I had been vegan for a very long time, and then I was a very strict vegetarian. I went through a very severe burnout stage in my life, and I was not okay. I was not well. And ultimately, I ended up incorporating animal foods back into my diet. And in doing that, I also discovered pro-metabolic approaches, which the discovery of that was really steeped in food freedom. And it was like, you can eat sugar, you can eat this, it's all good. And so I suddenly had permission to eat. And I had permission to eat whatever it was I felt like because
I used the example of this is going to heal my hormones, this is going to make me better, I'm not going to be burnt out anymore, I need to nourish my body, which was true. However, there's a lot of nuance to that. So ultimately, what happened for me is that giving myself permission to eat things, I became very permissive. Intuitive meant impulsive, and intuitive eating is not the same as impulsive eating. So I ate all the things that I had previously restricted. And it's taken me many years to actually be comfortable with my relationship with food, in the sense that, like, I don't feel the need to finish my plate. I'm not going to binge on ice cream. I'm not going to eat treats every day, because I actually only eat them when I truly desire them. And that's something that you have to learn in your body, and it takes time. It also takes practice. And because I was so permissive with my eating, and I went from this very restricted diet, vegan vegetarian, to opening my diet and suddenly eating way more calories and way more macronutrients, yeah, I gained weight. And so these are kind of the pitfalls that will happen. So I totally understand the frustration when you feel like you're failing at intuitive eating and you really, really want to get away from dieting and you want to get away from tracking your food, but you feel like the only way that you can maintain your body is to track your food. So, before we get into the pitfalls of intuitive eating, I want to talk a little bit about the science behind it and why it should ultimately be the goal for how we approach our relationship with food in our bodies. A recent meta analysis indicates that intuitive eating is associated with several positive health benefits, including fewer eating and psychopathology concerns, greater psychological and emotional well being, better body image and acceptance, and higher levels of social support, well being, and life satisfaction. Long-term studies have found that higher intuitive eating at baseline is associated with less depressive symptoms, body dissatisfaction, unhealthy weight control behaviors, extreme weight control behaviors, binge eating, and better self-esteem over time. Intuitive eating has gained a lot of steam in the last couple of decades and now has over 200 studies to qualify and quantify the principles of it. A little later in this episode, we're going to talk about some of the hurdles that you may face while you're trying to become an intuitive eater, but ultimately, I do believe that intuitive eating is the goal. And I don't feel ethically correct prescribing a diet to anybody. I think that there are certain phases and seasons of life where we do need to eat in a certain way in order to support our health, our hormones, our gut health, etc. But ultimately, the long-term goal should be able to eat intuitively and have a broad, wide range of food that we can eat without fear or shame or dogma. So yes, you can have sugar. Yes, you can have dairy, but you're also eating your veggies and your fruit and your whole grains and all of that stuff as well. And there was a recent study published in the Eating Behaviors Journal that explored how intuitive eating influences self-reported weight and eating behaviors. So the researchers aimed to understand whether adopting intuitive eating principles could lead to a healthier eating pattern and weight outcomes. Because if you don't know, intuitive eating is a weight neutral way of approaching food. It's not a weight loss diet. It's also not a weight gain diet. It's just how to eat naturally. If you do want to lose weight through it, or you do want to gain weight, muscle mass, that can be something that you address once you have kind of nailed the eating behaviors, and then you want to tweak things and refine things and go from there. So the key findings from the study were that participants had improved eating behaviors. So those who practiced intuitive eating reported healthier eating behaviors such as reduced emotional eating and less frequent overeating episodes. This also aligned with the principles of honoring your hunger and feeling your fullness, which encourages individuals to listen to their body cues rather than external diet rules, or in some cases, rather than listening to your calorie calculator or your app that tells you how much to eat and when. Participants also had positive weight outcomes. So, like I said, while intuitive eating is not a weight loss diet, the study found that some individuals experience weight stabilization or modest weight loss without the need for restrictive dieting. So this is suggesting that intuitive eating can support weight management by fostering a balanced relationship with food, which this makes sense because if your hormones are online, your hormones that tell you when you're hungry and when you're full, if your insulin sensitivity is online, so you're not on a blood sugar roller coaster, then your body is naturally going to tell you, hey, I'm hungry, we need energy. And then you're going to respond by being like, okay, body, I'm going to eat some, well-balanced, nutritious food. And then your body is being heard. So that creates safety, which creates balance signaling. You're eating, so you're getting that energy. And then your body's going to say, oh, we're good, we have enough, right? And then you're not going to be overeating. And in the case of weight loss, this means that you have better leptin sensitivity, which means ultimately over time your brain is able to regulate your weight, and your brain is able to say, hey, I recognize that we have extra weight on our bodies, so maybe we don't need to take in as much energy as we had originally thought, because we have this extra energy stored on the body that we can now use. But the body cannot use that energy if your leptin sensitivity is low or dysfunctional, because your brain won't get the message that, hey, we have extra energy on our body that we can use. Your brain's just thinking, oh, we don't have enough energy. So, and then you start overeating, right? So the hormonal piece is really important, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But ultimately, these studies have found that intuitive eating enhances your psychological well-being. So the studies really highlight the improvements in participants' psychological well-being, including better body image and reduced anxiety related to food choices. And these benefits are consistent with a broader body of research indicating that intuitive eating can lead to improved mental health outcomes. And I think this is so important, and this is why I ultimately make this the backbone of my coaching, is I have been there where it's just like you're tracking everything all the time, and you beat yourself up because you went over your calories or under your calories, or you didn't hit your macros, and you're just constantly thinking about food and stressed about food, and it's just a never ending spiral. And then you're just like, why isn't my body doing this or doing that, or why can't I accomplish my goals? But it's like you're so dysregulated and you're so stressed out and you're so focused on every little like minutia that it's no wonder that your psychological well-being is taking an impact, right? So ultimately the goal is to eat in an intuitive way, get really balanced with that, get to a place where your weight is stable, where your body is stable, where your hunger and fullness signals are stable. And then if you still want to do body recomposition, you can, but you're doing it from a really balanced approach. You're doing it from a place where, it's in celebration of your health rather than in some sort of restriction. So let's get a little bit into what is going wrong and the common pitfalls when you start approaching intuitive eating and the things that you will need to learn. So the first and probably the biggest one is that we're misreading our hunger and fullness cues. A lot of people don't know how to tune into their body's signals, especially if you've spent years dieting, or if you are struggling with your weight, if you have obesity, if you're overweight. Any of that is going to alter the hormones that regulate your hunger and fullness. So you actually need to get to a place of supporting your hormones and supporting your body and your metabolism and your gut health in order to bring those hunger cues back online. And you also have to drop into your body and become somatically aware, having that interoceptive signal to say, hey, I'm actually done. Because previously in my life, if you asked me, stop eating when you're full, what does that mean? I would be like, well, that means I stop eating when I'm so full that I'm going to throw up if I don't have another bite. Like if I have another bite of food, I'm going to throw up. Fullness to me meant being full to bursting. And a lot of people still, they have that idea. It's like, well, I'll stop eating when I'm full. Full means I'm so stuffed I could not eat another bite. But that's actually not what fullness is. Fullness is a signal that's coming from your body. And when you're eating slowly enough and in tune with your body, it's like this little whispering saying, don't want this anymore. I'm good. And then you're suddenly like, oh, I think I'm full. It's not like so much of a physical sensation as it's just this like subtle little message. And it's so easy to miss, especially if you've never been taught how to look for it. And the same thing with hunger. Sometimes we actually aren't hungry and we're craving a texture, an experience, a flavor, like something crunchy or stimulating, especially if you have like any sort of neurodivergent qualities to your brain. You might actually just be craving sensation as opposed to hunger. And sometimes it's like boredom or other emotions are tied into the experience of hunger. Or we are so afraid of being hungry that we make sure we're never hungry. We're always eating. I gotta eat because if I get hungry, my blood sugar is gonna drop and I'm gonna feel bad, right? But it's like that dysregulated blood sugar is another thing that we actually have to take care of to regulate, because again, if your blood sugars are dysregulated, if your hormones are dysregulated, it's going to be very difficult to get those clear I'm full and I'm hungry signals. So that is the first thing that goes wrong, and it's probably one of the more complicated things to address. This can also come up with like your intuition, quote unquote, is telling you to eat too much, and you don't feel sick or anything after you ate, but you just know like this is probably too much food, or you know because the results in your body are not the results that you're wanting to have. And it might be not so much that your intuition is telling you to eat more, but sometimes we have this relationship with food where we feel compelled to take more, like, and it's usually coming from an emotional root. So there's some sort of emotional tie in with that, and you have to discover what those emotional roots are. For me, I know there was a lot of like scarcity ideas around food, like I'm not going to get enough, I need my share, I need my portion. And it was really hard for me to share food, and it was really hard for me to leave food behind on my plate and not finish my entire plate. Those were things that were illogical, in terms of like, I should be able to just share a bite of food, or I should be able to just leave some food on the plate. But it was hard for whatever reason. And you have to come to discover those sort of internal emotional roots in order to implement this intuitive way of eating. Another way that this can come up is having difficulty with moderating food. So the concept of moderation, eat everything in moderation, can be really challenging, especially if you're transitioning from restrictive diets or coming from a background of dieting, yo-yo dieting throughout your life, or you're used to overeating food. The concept can be really difficult, and it can be very hard to understand what a weight appropriate amount of food looks like. Like, what is a normal sized plate? That can be a very difficult thing to figure out, and sometimes you just want to rely on your calorie tracker or your macro tracker. But what you actually want to end up doing ultimately with intuitive eating, again, is getting those hormonal signals stable so you can get clear messages from your body saying, I'm hungry and I'm full. So then instead of relying on the clock or a calorie counter or an app, you're actually listening to your own body. And over time, this is going to be a much easier way to regulate and enjoy foods in moderation, because you're going to have very clear signals saying, I'm good versus I'm hungry. And it can be very uncomfortable learning this at first, because we're taught not to trust our bodies. We're taught not to believe that our own bodies can send us messages. And especially, again, if you've been struggling with your weight or your eating habits, your relationship with food, your relationship with your body, you already don't trust your body. So it's going to be so much more challenging to get to a place where you can trust your body. And I actually do recommend using some of these tracking methods, because it can be very helpful to start learning the language of your body. And with intuitive eating, just like many things, you're not necessarily innately intuitive. If you think of a small child, like, they maybe have some concept of intuition, but our intuition is actually based on pattern recognition. And the more experience we have, the more knowledge we have, the more wisdom we have, the more strongly our intuition can give us signals. So if you don't understand nutrition, if you don't understand the concept of like, what is enough for me, and if you have all these other stories tied up with it about like, I need to eat this or else this will happen, or I can't eat this because if I do eat this, then this will happen. You're tying one thing to another outcome, but it might not necessarily be true. Like, if you're like, if I eat sugar, I will, enter your statement here, but that might not actually be true. So coming back to listen to your body and trust yourself is a process. And I think it's best done through slow exposure along with various tools like tracking, in order to really learn like what a portion looks like. How does this satisfy me? What am I actually eating right now? And that is a method that I teach in my coaching program, because I think it is also counterproductive to use these tracking tools without a good support system in place, because what ends up happening a lot of the time is that you just fall back into diet patterns. And I want to say here that all or nothing can be another mindset that really gets in the way. Intuitive eating is not a free pass to eat without boundaries. Like I said earlier on, when I first kind of stumbled into the food freedom and intuitive eating approach, my approach to food was very permissive and it was very impulsive. It was like, ooh, I can suddenly have all these things, so I'm going to have them all the time. And that was part of the healing journey for me. And it can be for other people. Sometimes you just go all in and you just do it to your heart's content, and who cares if you gain weight, because ultimately you're just repairing your relationship with food. But it doesn't have to be that approach either. And it's still like, if you're eating intuitively, you're still considering your health, you're still considering your nutrition, you're still considering like what is going to give me energy and vitality versus what makes me feel slow, sluggish, and stuck. So it's not a free pass to just eat whatever you want. And a lot of people make it out to seem like it is. They're like, well, I just only ate ice cream all the time. And I bet you that you had a little voice inside your head saying, this doesn't feel good. This isn't going to be good for me. I don't actually want this. But you did it anyway. So there's something there, right? There's something in between the impulse and the intuition. Another thing that really gets in the way of being able to tune into your own hunger signals is the influence of ultra processed foods. So, ultra processed foods can disrupt your natural hunger cues, easily contribute to overeating because they are so calorie dense and so low volume. And aside from the fact that they're very calorie dense and not very nutritious, ultra processed foods also contribute to a lot of metabolic disorders like type 2 diabetes, obesity, increased risk of cancers, and cardiovascular disease. And because of this, we can see that these ultra processed foods are contributing to overall inflammation in the body, which is going to again go back to my original point, dysregulate the hormones that tell you when you're hungry and when you're satisfied, among many other things like dysregulating your blood sugar, your thyroid, and even impacting your fertility and reproductive hormones. So then that gets right into the next thing that can be a bit of a hurdle when you're learning to eat intuitively, and that is hormonal imbalances that are affecting your hunger signals. So conditions like PCOS, thyroid disorders, they can impair the body's hunger and fullness cues. You really do have to get to the root before you can be intuitive. Things like leptin resistance, estrogen dominance, having obesity or metabolic syndromes, all of those need to be addressed because the conditions throw off hunger and your hormonal regulation, which again is going to throw off your ability to sense, when am I hungry? When am I satisfied? Those things need to be addressed first. So I really believe that metabolism and gut health are the foundations to become an intuitive eater. And if you don't address those foundations, you're going to keep kind of going through this yo-yo dieting phase of like, I'm going to eat intuitively. Oh no, I overdid it. I have to backtrack. I have to go back to counting calories and restricting. And then, oh, I want to try eating intuitively again. And you can see how this pattern would arise. And again, like I mentioned, there is a lot of misunderstanding about the intuitive eating principles. Some people equate intuitive eating with unrestricted or permissive eating, leading to overconsumption. Again, it's just like, screw diet culture, screw your diet rules. I'm going to eat whatever I want. And then you eat a ton of food that ultimately isn't serving you. It's not serving your health. It's not serving your body. And often it's not making you feel well. Like, I see these influencers who are body positive influencers, and they're definitely living with what we would call obesity, but they aren't necessarily promoting health. Like, they'll eat things and then they'll be like, I eat this even though it makes me feel sick. And for me, I'm just like, wouldn't you want to eat things that make you feel less sick or make you feel well? Right? And it's not about the body or the body size. It's about the experience of being in your body. And wouldn't you want to give your body food and nourishment that makes you feel energized and alive and doesn't make you feel bloated, sick, headachy or reactive? I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. I also fully support autonomy. So, do whatever you want. It's your life and it's your body and you can make decisions about it. So there's that as well.
Now, I'm going to ask you a quick favor. If you love this episode, I'd appreciate it if you took a moment to leave a review, Give me some stars or share it with a friend who needs to hear this. If you have a topic that you'd love me to talk about, contact me at shay@vitaessentia.com. And if you're ready to start rewilding your gut and improving your well-being, don't forget to download my gut guide. You can find it under the free resources section of my website. And all the details are in the show notes.
So how can you do intuitive eating in a way that is going to lead to long-term sustainable results? You want to get support. I don't recommend doing this alone because it is a really big learning curve, especially for those who have yo-yo dieted or struggled with weight or struggled with their relationship with food. There's a lot of things to unlearn, and there's a lot of new things to learn. And you can do it a lot faster with a lot less pitfalls if you do it with support. So I do recommend doing that. I am opening my coaching program this fall. So if you want to get in there and go through the process that I teach that allows you to rebuild your circadian rhythm, your gut health, and your metabolism so you can ultimately learn about nutrition and what supports your body to become somebody who eats intuitively and understands how things are affecting their body. The application for that program, which will be coming this fall, is in the show notes. So if that's something that's interesting to you, please fill out the application. There's no commitment, but at least you can get in and we can see if it'll be the right fit for you. But in the meantime, you can start building up habits that will support you to eat intuitively. So we want to build body awareness using somatic cues, mindful practices, slowing down when you're eating and really paying attention to what's going on in your body and how you feel and how you're responding to the foods that you're choosing. Learn to identify your true hunger versus emotional eating. So sometimes journaling or, slowing down and just distracting yourself for a little bit can be really helpful here. And a really big one is to reduce your reliance on ultra processed foods because, like we said earlier, those are going to really dysregulate your appetite along with many systems in your body, especially if that is the bulk of the food that you're eating. I have many episodes on metabolism. I have episodes on gut health about how all of these systems are ultimately going to affect you. So yeah, reducing your reliance on ultra processed foods is going to make a very big difference. Incorporating more whole foods. So if you're like, I don't know how to do this, instead of taking anything away, just add more things in. Add in some veggies, add in some fruit, add in sources of fiber, add in new proteins, experiment, see what you like, but maybe don't start with taking things away and just start with adding things in and see how that changes things for you. And then we can use tracking as a tool, not as a cage. I usually recommend just track what you've already eaten rather than trying to build out the perfect plan in your tracker. And the reason for this is that putting in what you're already eating is going to give you a lot of data. And then from there, you can kind of start adding in more supportive foods. But again, I really recommend doing this with the help of a registered nutritionist like myself or a dietitian. The reason being is that it's so easy to fall into diet patterns and you might start immediately restricting your food and then building out in your tracker. I can only eat this many calories, this many macros, blah, blah, blah. And then you aren't actually learning to eat intuitively. You are once again just relying on tracking calories. Any sort of tracking that we do, we want to use it as data, not as a judgment or some sort of way of finding a new way of restricting. We're just using it as data to see how is the body responding, what is going on, and then from there, moving into a deeper sense of self-knowing. Because ultimately with intuitive eating, you're going to get to a place where your weight stabilizes. You're not gaining weight, you're not losing weight, you're eating ice cream, you're eating chips, you're eating all the things. You're also eating vegetables and you're eating fruit and you're eating healthy, but healthy encompasses all the foods that bring you joy as well. And when we get to a true place of intuitive eating, having this style of eating where you have all the things included, you're not gaining weight from it because it's conditioned in our brain that if I eat these quote unquote bad foods, I will gain weight. But that's not true. So we want to get to a place where the body is stable, and from there you can decide on where you want to go. but we do not want to be going up and down, up and down, up and down with our weight. And that is where these kinds of tools of tracking can be really useful to see, are we in a place of stability? Are we kind of in the same pattern over and over and over again? And if the answer is yes, then you can start making tweaks. Another thing that's really important is, again, I've said intuitive eating is not disregarding your nutrition, it's not disregarding your health. So if you do have these hormonal or metabolic conditions, you're going to have to tailor your nutrition to make yourself healthier. If that is a goal for you, which I think if you're listening to this podcast, you probably want to be healthier. You probably want to have more energy. You want to have less bloating. You want to feel more vitality. And so, yes, you're going to use nutrition to cater to that. And that may mean that there's some things that maybe really don't serve your body. And maybe you shouldn't include them in your diet for the most part, right? Like, this is something that you have to consider. What is more important to you? Is it more important to me that I have this particular food even though I know it doesn't serve my body? Or is it more important to me that I take care of my body and give it what it really responds well to? That is a decision that only you can make. Another thing that you're going to want to do is start supporting your nervous system and your circadian rhythm. So food is only a part of the puzzle, but how we actually interact with our environment, the thoughts that we have, the stories that we tell about ourselves, about our bodies, about our relationship with food, all of those things play deeply into this whole intuitive eating ethos, right? So if your story tells you, like, I could never eat that way, then you're going to have to dig into, why is that true for you, or why is that not true? You know, maybe it could be a different way. If you're like, I have to track my calories, otherwise this will happen. Is that actually true for you? Or, you know, maybe there's a deeper layer of work that you could do to have a higher amount of freedom. Again, only you can really make this decision. And again, we have to recognize the emotional roots of eating patterns, trauma, anxiety, depression, OCD, neurodivergent conditions like autism, ADHD. All of these are going to vastly change our relationship with food and our relationship with our bodies. And it can be that there's a little more of a hurdle to overcome before you can get to this place of intuitive eating and food freedom and bodily autonomy. So things like binging, hoarding food, not being able to share, leave food behind on the plate, all of these are patterns that are coming from some type of emotional root. A lot of the time, emotions are deeply tied in with our relationship to food. And this is a relationship that is established early on in life. So if you go back to childhood and start looking at how you interacted with food and your relationship with food when you were a child, like very small, maybe 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, what did your relationship with food look like back then? And how has it patterned into your life now as an adult? Those are sort of the things that you're going to want to start looking at if you do struggle with things like overeating, hoarding food, having to finish your plate, not being able to share food, you know, all of these kind of trigger points. If you look back into childhood, you will probably have some pattern that comes up there. But ultimately, using intuition as a skill is one that takes practice. And what intuitive eaters are doing is they're spotting patterns. They're joining the dots across all of their knowledge and experiences to make choices that are in line with how they want to feel. So this requires knowledge of nutrition, hormones, metabolism, and how your unique body responds. Because if you do not know how to eat in a nutritious way, it's going to be really hard to intuitively choose nutritious food. If you are only eating highly processed foods, it's going to be very hard to intuitively decide to eat something completely different. And part of this is due to how your gut responds. Your gut microbiome craves the things that you regularly put in there. So if you haven't differentiated your diet, then it's going to be really hard to crave different things. So what I teach in my program is ultimately this pattern spotting in your own body and learning to respond intuitively while you learn about what truly metabolism supporting foods, gut supporting foods are, how to eat in a way that is both ancestral and seasonal, but also creates space for your favorite things. Because I think it's really disheartening when you see that people say intuitive eating didn't work for them because they just craved cake all the time and they're just like, I will have to track my calories until I die. I don't think that is a great way to live. But again, you know, you got to do you. I do think that when intuitive eating is misunderstood, it is most likely to fail. But ultimately, don't we all want to cultivate trust in our bodies and be able to sustain our health without thinking about it constantly? You know, if you are interested in this and you want to get to this point, just be gentle with yourself, stay curious, and keep reflecting on what's going on. It has taken me many, many years of self reflection and internal work and self observation to get to a point where I feel pretty confident in my ability to eat intuitively and not overdo it. If this is something that you feel really called towards and you really want to learn, you want the freedom of eating whatever food, but you also want your gut to be online, your metabolism to be online, you want to feel vital, clear energy, then I would invite you again to fill out the application form attached to this episode in the show notes for my new coaching program that will be releasing this fall. And by filling out that application form, I will reach out to you, talk to you a little bit more about what's going on, and let you know the details of the program when it is ready to launch. And there's no pressure. You can fill out that form, you can decide later, you can decide right now. It's all good, but I'll be here for you when you're ready. I hope that this episode gave you a little bit of insight into what intuitive eating is and how it can support your body and your mood, and also the pitfalls that come up when you try to approach it. If you have any questions at all, always reach out. My Instagram handle is at shay.vita, that's SHAY.VYTA, and my inbox is always open. Until next time, I hope you have a lovely week and a lovely day.